The second tip that is very important is to read the question in reverse. So this. Hi friends, welcome to Plexus Ortho. My name is Dr. Kannan Kumar, and today we're going to discuss a very important topic for your NEET PG exam, and we're going to discuss how to crack the MCQs in NEET PG. During my time, we used to have about 300 questions for 3.5 hours, but now the questions have been reduced to about 200 questions, and the time is still the same. So you have a lot more time in your hands, but of course the questions are getting more and more difficult, more factual, more memory based. Now you have image based questions. So cracking these MCQs require a specific knack. It does not require you to know everything about all the subjects. You have to have a broad overview of all the subjects, and today we are going to give you 5 tips about how to crack these MCQs in NEET PG exam, how to crack the NEET PG exam. So let's start off straight away without wasting any time. The first tip that I would give you is break down your exam into 3 stages. This is what I used to do. So breaking down into 3 stages makes it much easier. The first stage I would say is about 15 minutes to about 20 minutes is to go through all the questions quickly, right? Just to have a brief outline of how the exam paper has been set. So make a quick overview of all the questions, skim through the questions, all the 200 questions, and that would be your first stage. And the second stage would be to go sequentially one question by following another one, and make sure you are answering the easy questions. Don't get stuck on any question. So the second stage is answering the questions that you know. The first stage is just skimming through the paper, and the second stage is answering the questions that you know one by one. It doesn't have to be exactly sequentially. You can do in whatever order you want, but quickly go through and finish all the questions that you really know. Right? There are some questions which are very straightforward, some questions that you know so well and you have studied so well, and that you know the topic in depth, so you can answer the question in a few seconds. So go through such questions, make sure you answer these questions properly, and take about an hour and a half to finish the questions that you know. Then comes the third stage in the exam, where you go through the questions that you are not sure of, or you have no idea about, or you have some difficulty in answering these questions. So I would break down the exam into 3 phases. The first phase is to skim through the paper. While skimming through, I find a few questions. I will probably find a few questions which are very, very easy. You can mark them away right away there. Then in the second phase, you go through each of these questions about an hour and a half. I do the last phase in multiple cycles. That means I go through the remaining questions, answer as many questions as possible, then come back again, which I have left, and then go through the cycle. Still I have very few questions left, and there will be, of course, in every exam there will be some googly questions where you have no idea about the answer and you can probably leave them, but of course they have to be a certain percentage of the answers. You can't leave a large chunk and then expect to get a great result out of it. So basically the first tip that I would like to give you is break your exam in 3 stages. The timing that each stage entails may be different for different person, but break it down. Try and do the easy questions first, skim through the paper, then do the moderately easy questions, and then get stuck on to the difficult questions and work on them. So the second tip that is very important is to read the question in reverse. So this is a tip that I've used very often. Now that you have less number of questions and more time, the clinical vignettes are getting longer and longer. So there are about 4 or 5 lines in each question, and therefore you have to address these questions in a more scientific or a more easy way, where you can, instead of reading all the investigations and everything about the patient. So what I would do is read the question in reverse. So read the last question line that they're given in the clinical vignette and try and understand what they're trying to ask from us, right? And then look at the rest of the vignette, and this can give you, can save time, number one, and you're not breaking your head over simple things given in between. A lot of gibberish may be given in between the questions. So you can skip all that out, and then you can understand what the examiner exactly wants. So the second tip that I would like to give you is that read the question in reverse. The third tip that we would like to give you today is the elimination method, right? So I mean, I'm sure you've heard of this in a lot of videos. A lot of examiners have spoken about it. A lot of teachers have told you about this. What exactly is the elimination method? Elimination method is try and remove the options that do not fit into the question, or they don't seem to match with the question, right? So there are questions where you know the answer straight away, and those questions you must be able to tick away straight away, and those don't require elimination method. And that is the first phase of your exam, where you skim through the questions, whichever is easy you just mark them off, and those questions are not which require elimination method. Elimination method is for the next batch, or the second stage and the third phase of your exam, where you don't know these questions, right? So for the elimination method, what are the methods you can use to eliminate some of the options? One is that when there are two options which are opposites, right? When there are two options where are opposite, one is saying that there is acidic medium, and this is, let's say, another one is saying alkaline medium, and something which is saying valgus and varus in orthopedics. So you can probably narrow down to these two options and remove away all the other options. So this is a way of elimination. Many times the longest option is the best, is probably the answer, because many times the examiner will not work very hard to put a wrong answer as a very long answer. So if you get what I'm saying. So the long answer, or the longer stem in the MCQ options, is probably the right answer. Then when a question has all of these or none of these, is more likely to be the answer. A lot of studies have shown that 95% of the times when MCQs have all of these or none of these, they are likely to be the answer. So the third tip we would like to give you is use the elimination method. Elimination method has multiple small techniques. So what everybody advises, and what I have also followed, is when you have two options, it's best to mark one of them. So you have a 50% chance of positivity. You have 4 marks for positive answer and 1 for negative. So it's better, there's a higher chance of getting a positive mark. So therefore, when you have two options, I think it's better off to mark one and go on answering the rest of the questions. What is the fourth tip that we would like to give? The fourth tip we would like to give is, when you have two options and it's B and C, it seems that the literature shows that the best possible answer is probably B. And even when I have been setting questions for students for orthopedics, I have noticed that I always put in the answer in option B. And it's more likely, I've seen that when I've statistically scored it, I've seen that about 40% of my questions have B as the answer. So when you have a doubt, or when you have narrowed between two options and one of the option is option B is a good way to go and click and go ahead and increase the chances of your getting a higher score. Okay, so that is tip number 4. Tip number 4 is mark option B. So marking option B is a good technique when you are in doubt between two answers. Tip number 5. Tip number 5 is a very simple tip, and this is something that every student makes a mistake and we lose points because of it. Always read a question twice, right? So when you read a question twice is when you have made sure that you've understood the question properly. You're not making mistakes in the not, in the except, and other small grammatical changes in the question. So always read a question twice before you mark the answer. This holds good for all phases of your exam. Phase 1, where you're skimming through the paper. Phase 2, when you're answering the moderately difficult questions. And phase 3, questions which you have no idea about. Make sure in every question you read the question twice. Okay. So a bonus tip, or a tip number 6, is that when you think that you don't know the answer, the first thing that strikes your mind, or the first answer that comes to your mind, is probably right. So don't overthink answers. The most common answer is probably the right answer, or the first thing that strikes your mind is probably the right answer. And this is what bonus tip, or tip number 6. So these are some tips to help you in cracking the MCQ based NEET PG exam. Hopefully this helps you, and we'll meet you again with another video. And my name is Dr. Kannan Kumar. Thank you very much.